Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 157 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we're going to upgrade some of our factory with these modules we've made. Enjoy! Now, we don't need to go through the entire factory upgrading everything. It's kind of no point. Plus, it's many thousands of machines. It's not worth it. Nobody's got time for that. But anytime we're building something new, of course, it will now use modules. And any existing setup that can be enormously improved by the use of modules should basically get them. And it's nice seeing all of these requests start, because I think our factory is just on the verge of making all these requests. So that last research put it over the edge here. Now we're going to start using up all this stuff. Using up more zinc there. And what does the bus look like now? Pretty good. Now we're just down to the one method, the most ideal method. Wonder if the limiters down here are working. It looks like they are. Where the limiter for both sapphirite and givelite are on. So you go here, and they've been shut down, and thus are not coming out here. And these ran out, and these ones are just about to run out. So definitely, those limiters are working, and that's probably helping us make exactly the resources we want to make in exactly the way we want to make them. So we've got our agricultural modules. Oh, they only stack in 50s. And see, they don't go in here. The only thing they actually fit in are farms. This farm has the modules listed. This one doesn't. Can only be used for agricultural purposes. I guess this doesn't count. But growing them the more efficient way does. Huh. Okay. Well, there's no real disadvantage to agricultural modules that they increase productivity. And it says pollution increase, but since farms take away pollution from the environment, it actually increases the rate at which it takes it away. So the unaffected farm is -80. It's -104 for this. So it's just plus 30% speed, and hey, look at that, we can watch the needle go up now. That'll definitely help. And none of that stuff can get them. Same here. Hellbond will definitely help us try to figure out which one of these machines get agricultural modules. But for now, we can put them in there. Now all of our farms could really benefit from them, technically. But all the farms were sized based on not getting the modules, so there's really no point in throwing a bunch of modules in there now. But for any future farms, that will certainly help. I want to throw these extra modules back in. And it looks like it maxed out already, but I guess we can put them in these machines here. There we go. We'll just carry our stack. Now, productivity modules are certainly valuable, but they only go in certain machines. It's basically the intermediates machines. And they do have the disadvantage that they dramatically slow down speed. So it's probably not something we want to just throw in a bunch of machines, because otherwise we're going to have to rebuild it. The only difference is, perhaps if we only had one machine to begin with. So if we put them in these machines, we would need more machines to make up for the fact that the machines are individually going slower. In a situation like this, where this thing's barely running at all, we could probably be just fine here. Where if we want to select all this, we need 2 solder on the left, and like 1 on the right. So 3 solder a second. And this can produce many, many more times than that. So, for a machine like this, it can absolutely get productivity modules, and it has even more slots. So we check it now. It's going a lot slower, but it's still giving us the couple of pieces that we need. And this is certainly easier to do on machines as you're building them. but we can kind of check all this here. We need 1.8 plates per second. And this produces 6. So we put the productivities in there. And we still absolutely can make it. And basically, putting these in all of your intermediates, especially the machines that chop coils into plates, is going to have a dramatic reduction in the amount of resources that you use for anything. But it's going to about cut it in half. Just about. Like, especially if it's all along the chain. So it's like you can put productivities here to cut them into plates, and then you could put productivity modules again to make the intermediate component. So along the chain of your entire factory, you can save an enormous amount of resources. And we definitely need to do all this for science. For these modules, it's a little less important. So we need about 1 on each side. So we absolutely can put a bunch of productivities in here again. But it still adds up for modules, so there's kind of no reason not to. You can see how this can go into everything, where we can put it into tinned wire coil, we can put it into the components, but actually, because we have 2 slots here, one thing we can do is put a productivity module in, which slows it down by 30%. Then we can put a speed module in there to make up for it. So with those 2 modules, it's creating a lot of extra pollution, so 30% extra pollution, but it's 10% faster and has 10% better efficiency for materials. So this is much easier to do on a new setup. I think I'm going to leave most of the things on the base as they are, but some of the newer stuff that we're doing, basically all of the material sinks, so specifically this electronics bus for sure, and I don't know if we could put them in the crystals there. We might as well try, because crystals are kind of short, and especially the science. Like, we need this for science because this is going to completely change the way that we design our blue science setup, which we've already calculated at 3 items per second. And these are the resource requirements that we're going to need, especially the 156 copper. And I think I calculated that we would drop this 156 down to about 80 by using modules in every possible section along the chain. So we don't need to go through the entire factory, but we should try to upgrade the things that we would get a lot of benefit from. And all of these intermediate machines can use productivity modules. So we'll just have to calculate them individually. I guess it makes sense. They all need to produce about 30 per second. I wonder what 3 productivities and a speed would do to that. A little too slow. Then a little too fast. So if you don't need extra speed and you don't need extra productivity, then you can put in the pollution reducing ones, but I don't know if you'd ever get that far to really care. But it's something you can do, I guess. So mixed everything together. Crafting speed is down by 20%, productivity is up by 20%, and pollution is up by 60%. And that gives us roughly our 30. And once we figure one thing out, we should probably go through all of the machines, making sure they're set up that way. Alright, I got tired of inserting all these manually. So we can use module inserter for that. Red, red, blue, yellow. And now we should be able to come through here and update all of them. Yep. It's a little silent, but it works. And even the silicon can use it. So we put in a productivity, and then we put in a speed to make up for it. And we can put them in for the electronics components as well. But since it's got 4 slots here, it's probably going to be the exact same orientation as these other ones here, so we can check it. Doing the rate calculator, the output per second is 32 and something. It's weird how it's just silent. And we check it all. And it's a little bit less, but it's still above 30. And that's what counts. Because the belt can only do 30 at a time anyway. And there we go. By doing that, we decrease the resources that go into it by 20%. Creates a ton of pollution, but less resources, which is better. So yeah, I don't want to go through the entire factory doing this. But certainly all of this stuff we just built can benefit from it. So we need 5.1 silver wire. This creates a ton more than that. Oh, it doesn't count as an intermediate product though. See, that's always weird where you can never really guess the things that are intermediates and the things that aren't. So silver wire stays the same, but we can put it into copper. So we need 45. Well, but it's actually less than that because this machine doesn't run at full speed. So it's double, so it needs like 10.5 copper. It's probably not quite enough. So we'll have to take one out. Let's put a speed module in there. It's about as good as we can get out of that one. And interestingly, these module boards themselves can be improved. Actually, it kind of makes sense that pretty much every machine will be the same, assuming we're just dropping them in place, where this ratio will work out. Well, we get noise there if we remove them. Any machine that we have multiples of, if we have a single machine, well, that might be different. We'll have to treat that as an individual use case. But if we have lots of machines that take it, and of course these ones do too, we can throw them in there. It should be about 15 a second, and it basically is. It's not an exact ratio here, but it's pretty close. Well, this makes it a lot faster. Figuring out what the machine should get, and then just letting the robots do the work. It actually won't be that long before we run out of modules, which is kind of what I was thinking. That you wouldn't think that you would use that many modules, but then when you're throwing them into every single machine in large quantities, suddenly they all disappear. Oh yeah. Those productivity modules are going to be gone before too long. So, how's the ore boss doing? Honestly, pretty good. It used up the tin, so now tin is a little lower. Nickel's a little lower. And there's no clogs. Everything is where it should be. That's great. Hopefully it stays that way. Well, that covers all of the module machines down here. Of course, there's still the components that are up here as well, but before we cover those, I kind of want to go down to science and make sure science machines have been upgraded before we're just using all of them up. We do have a crystal dust train that's mostly full and ready to go, but I haven't bothered sending it up since we don't have a critical shortage of modules yet. I'm not sure if any of this stuff counts as intermediate or not. So no on that, no on that. The actual science packs do count as intermediates, which is interesting that the components that go into them do not. Well, in that case, it's probably a productivity and then a speed to make up for it. So let's get this set up. Productivity and speed. And I imagine all of them are this way. So let's just get them all identical. So it's not a huge improvement, but it is a 10% increase to productivity. And that's not nothing. That adds up. So what about these other components here? Nope. Nope. And nope. Well, certainly the coil cutting machines can, and probably these wire machines, but what about everything else? No, 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 no. no, and no. But the plate machines, yes. And I imagine that these machines are so much faster than they need to be. It needs to produce 3.6. It produces 6. So is this a situation where 2 productivities is too little? Yes. So productivity and efficiency. Probably the same for both sides. Needs 3. That's 6. So probably the same. Productivity and efficiency. The same again. I can just tell by the numbers that it's the same again. Once you memorize that these produce exactly 6 plates a second, then when you look at the input, so I see this input is 6 plates a second, and that's going to be exactly what this makes. So it needs to be productivity and speed. And now that's matched. So productivity, efficiency. This is so much easier to do in Hell Mod, and you can just figure out exactly what you need without having to do this all manually. But that one's super efficient, so probably all productivity there. And I think that does it for this stuff. What about agricultural one? Nope, that's weird. The other science packs you can put an efficiency one in, but not agricultural. And we can't put them in the labs. Alright. Science has been upgraded. Let's finish up with the electronics bus. And that'll probably be the last major thing that gets upgraded with modules. Might want to go through and look at all the sorting setups, but I don't think any of that stuff uses modules. It might. I mean, everything is worth a shot now that we have access to productivity modules to see what is and isn't affected. But see, the modules lab sure takes productivity modules. So, since speed really isn't a concern with any of these, we can just do productivity for all of them. And there they go. Even bigger giant mess of icons. 70% reduction in research speed, but 30% increase in productivity. I mean, that seems fine with me. Can always build more. That's why there's a big gap there. So, all of these can receive productivity modules. And I imagine, because we've already calculated that this is the exact ratio for dropping these in place, that this should work out. So we select all of this. It's slightly less than 15. Seems like it should be exactly 15, but whatever. Doesn't need to be. We select everything. And watch the modules drain away. Already down to the last 109 productivity modules. So let's check this. It should be slightly less than it was before, but it's still around 14, so that's fine with me. What about all these cases? Yep. More productivity. So we're making exactly 6. And probably want to use the module inserter for this, because we want a speed and a productivity. Other than upgrading these bus systems here, probably the best use for modules is to upgrade existing setups that don't have enough space to be properly upgraded. So basically, it's like, oh no, we don't have enough of this. It's like, well, let's throw some speed modules in there. Okay, now we have enough. So that's probably what we're going to use most of our modules for, at least on the existing setups. Any new setups are, of course, going to use any available space for modules, because why not? Well, there they go. The productivity modules are gone. Used them up. So we'll just have to let the factory operate and get to it later. We're waiting on this crystal dust train, and it actually hasn't received very much crystal dust. Like, at all. I imagine the reason is because this new setup of managing the ores has managed it well enough to where we're basically not using chunks for anything anymore. At least until these rare resources drop down. Like if aluminum drops down, then we'll start making chunks again. So that's probably why all of that has stopped. And we could grow some crystal dust with our new seeds, or we could wash for geodes. It's not critical right now, so I don't see any immediate need to build any of those new setups. We'll just have to be patient. And eventually, things will catch up. And if we run into a situation where, like, we're building blue science, and we're like, where are these modules already? Well, then we can send that train around and perhaps start making stuff. I want to check to see if any of the ore sorting processes can use the productivity modules. I don't think that they can. I think that doesn't count as an intermediate. That counts as like a base item. So I don't think we can do anything like that. But we might as well check here. Okay. The ore sorting machines can use them, but the processing machines, such as the washers and the crushers, cannot. Neither can any of these powderizers. But ore sorting can. Well, that would be a huge increase in efficiency. Because, for example, with these ore sorting warehouses here, normally when this runs, it uses the entire factory's output of these two ores. So of, say, sapphirite. But if we can put a productivity module in there and reduce its consumption by 10%, say, then that will leave that 10% to go to a different process, and it will still be controlled just fine with this setup and will work. So there is value to putting productivity modules in there. And of course, we could put productivity modules into drills to make the patches last longer if we wanted to. You can't even put any modules in the ore processors. No for ingots, no for melting them down, and the strand casters can't even take them. But you can use them to make plates. That seems like an oversight to me. If we come in here and say we want to make like copper coils. Now the first machine has no module slots, but then see the second tier machine has 1, 2, and then 3. So let's see if we use this machine, is productivity available? It isn't. So it's not available to make coils. In the end, it doesn't really matter, and perhaps it's done that way because you would double dip. Because when we chop the coils down, we can put the productivity modules in there to get the benefit from it. So we get the same benefit either way compared to doing it with these machines compared to the strand casters, but the strand casters compress them into coils, making them a quarter of their size, so they still have an advantage there. But the factory looks pretty dormant again. How we're doing on seeds? Well, certainly plant life has collected. Probably should increase the numbers on plant life as well. So we made those other numbers a little bigger. Let's do the same with these, except let's make it 500. Then like 1,000. And gardens are continuing to grow. So they are getting bigger. You know, we have 50 of them now. Because we made those numbers larger, it's still not enough to make seeds, which are set to 60. But it's working pretty well. It's stabilizing. It's certainly nice having the agricultural modules in there. For sure. Now that we have a selection of those biome planners, we probably want to finish up with this research to make use of the new seeds that we're making. And let's hit rubber. Don't specifically need it for anything, but it'll complete the tree here, and it'll give us access to it if we want it in the future. And there's all this bio stuff we can do, but I don't think we really need to go down that. And there's gems, which we would need to do for laser turrets, but I don't think we need to go through that process now, especially because we want our crystal dust for other purposes. And electric poles, we were waiting on having a new bus to build those. We need the electric motors for mining vehicle 3. These filter inserters are very oddly placed, where we basically need cobalt to build those. Otherwise we could make them, so it's really just one resource type and then we'd be able to do it. But it's kind of weird. You would think it should be a blue technology, but it isn't. That's it for the green technologies. And then the military stuff, yeah, there's still a few things we can do, but I don't see any need to go running down all that stuff right now, since the bus seems like it's pretty good on nickel. And I think we are ready to start exploring blue science. because we've got nothing else really to do. We're waiting on the blue science packs here. So it'll unlock the third lab, which is even faster. Now this is a cool thing about the labs, where the energy requirement for the lab actually goes up. So most machines, although they go faster, they also require more electricity, but generally you get more efficiency in the end. But with these labs from Science Cost Tweaker, it actually makes the higher tier labs consume even more power. So they become less efficient the higher up they go. But that kind of makes sense because they're researching more and more complicated types of science. So I kind of like how that works. But it upgrades from the green labs. It needs these tier 3 construction components, which is brass plates and, interestingly, solar panels, large ones, and 5 of them. So I don't even know, like, handcrafting, that's not going to be really an option. I want to put that on the bus for sure if it uses solar panels. But we'll also need this lab optics and analyzers from the light source and femto laser array, and that's all these components here. So this requires copper, glass, and silver, and then the emitter, aluminum, copper, glass, electronics boards, and then we need this flash fuel, which requires naphtha. We actually don't have a way to produce naphtha right now. Now we can with our oil sands production, and that process hasn't run for many episodes, and I kind of don't want to turn it on again because we're so overloaded on oil residuals right now. So we're probably going to have to drill for oil to get that naphtha. So that's something we're going to have to set up, but that's, you know, it's just oil stuff, so that's pretty straightforward, and we're not going to need that much of it, so it probably won't be that big of a process. We combine those 3 items plus nitrogen gas to create a laser array. A lot of this stuff creates byproducts, so we'll just have to deal with that. It will make some of the copper come back. And then to make the optics and analyzers, you need the laser array, which we'll have made, and then the sulfur light source, which is sulfur dioxide gas, which is kind of an interesting requirement, because I don't think we've really needed that for anything other than making more sulfuric acid. But it also requires the tier 2 stuff of the Atmos reaction nodes and the microcircuits. So that's kind of interesting how that works. So we'll grab it, and finally, when we hit that blue science pack, look at all of that stuff that's now going to populate our menu by eyeballing that uranium processing. But so blue science pack, first we have to make the atomic sensor array, which is just more requirements of components there. And then finally we add everything we have there, plus sodium hydroxide, to get our blue science. And the sodium hydroxide is kind of problematic because we're only producing it as a byproduct. We'll see how much sodium hydroxide is left over when this starts, but I'm kind of worried it's going to be a bit of a problem because this also requires so much aluminum that we might find ourselves completely out of sodium hydroxide. But it's actually not the end of the world, that we can generate some if we need to. We'll basically have 2 primary ways of getting more sodium hydroxide from our byproducts. One is to add water to sodium, which gives us our sodium hydroxide. And we can get that sodium by electrolyzing our salt, and we have quite a bit of salt just sitting around, so that's why I haven't used it for anything. It will give us chlorine gas, which we'll probably have to dump, but that will be a way of keeping that circle closed loop. Another interesting method is we can make sodium from sodium carbonate, which we can actually create from growing brown algae, and brown algae is the algae grown from saline water. So that's kind of a long drawn out process that we can use to make sodium hydroxide too. So once we actually have the blue science packs, we will have more options when it comes to sodium hydroxide. In the beginning, we might have to brute force it just to make sure we don't run out, because if we run out, no science will be made. So we'll hit that, and look at all that stuff that is now added to the list. Once that's researched, suddenly we have options again. Well, let's see how this works. It's probably going to be quite efficient, but we did upgrade all these machines. So it actually might be kind of nice to see if all this stuff is working properly. I mean, as far as I can tell, it basically is. Those labs are definitely much faster than they need to be, so all of the science is disappearing. But it's looking pretty good, though. It's all basically green. I noticed there's a extra belt in there, and I can't let that stand. Right there. I can officially say that disaster has now been averted. See, it's all pretty green, but it looks like it's starting to go through these. Let's make sure these numbers make sense. It's 3 per second, and these actually require 3.3. So that ratio is not correct, but that's because the speed on these was increased. We wanted the productivity increase, but we used the speed increase just to make up the difference, but it still is slightly faster than it started. So there is no longer enough of these machines. So we probably want to add a tiny bit of speed modules in here to make up for that. So now that we do that, it's much faster. And let's throw some inefficiencies in there since we did go through the effort of dropping some components in there. But we've already maxed out the belt here, so there's really no point in making these any faster because we only have the one belt and there's no point in making two. Definitely when you start adding modules into pre-existing setups, it will change the ratio a little bit. So that's why I don't want to go through the entire factory throwing modules everywhere because it's just going to mess everything up. The only time I really care about it is if we can throw productivity modules in there, because if we can, well, then that changes things a bit. Makes it worthwhile to mess with everything. How about the pollution? Do we have a huge pollution cloud here now? Kinda. Although, compared to everything else in the base, it's not that big. I mean, pollution really isn't that bad at this factory. Like, it's actually quite clean. I'm kind of surprised. Like, there's certain parts of the factory that have no pollution at all. This is quite alright. This machine I kind of want to put some speed modules into. Just to make it work a little faster. And there we go. We have researched blue science. So now it's time to start planning it. But that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.